hands down. So what I do want to say is basically that the Northeast is the most viable corridor because of obviously its compactness and its history, and that it has current infrastructure already. You already have the Acela Amtrak train running, and the bigger issue here is, okay, we have high speed. We should be moving to true high speed, and that's really the debate in the Northeast. The key issue for the Northeast is because of the congestion issues with airports, is that the train is truly competing with the airport and with this congestion issue. So if they can pull it off where the ease of true high speed is getting on the train and getting to your point A to point B destination flawlessly without any hassles, then the viability will be there. If it's going to be a situation where it's similar to the airport, where you're going to have to do a lot of checks in and checks out, then we may have problems. But at this particular point, the Northeast is set to go. How do you advance this one? Express. Okay. All right, so we have the major population here. As you can see here, it runs from about southern Maine to northern Virginia. The cities and the regions are included here. Baltimore, it runs from Portland to Washington, D.C. Again, the major cities in between: Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington. Population about 50 million, and the projection for 2025 would be it's about 18%, another 8 million. Pretty much that just gives all the information on the Northeast here. Again, what we'll discuss is the growth pattern of the Northeast is crucial. It will continue to grow. The economic base, as you can see, it's a $2.5 trillion economy, so it's well positioned, 20% of the US GDP on a small area of land. So the concentration is there for the Northeast, and pretty much the existing infrastructure is already there.
Okay.
The next corridor that we were looking at was the Pacific Northwest. It's also referred to as the Cascadia Corridor, and it's found in the northwestern part of the United States. As you see on the map there, that's just the proposed corridor. It's the major U.S. cities of Seattle and Portland. Usually isn't as big, but it's still a major city. And it also crosses international borders into Canada to get to Vancouver. So being that it's international, it makes it pretty significant. It's along the Pacific Ocean, north of California, as you can see up there. Right now, in 2000, the population was nearly 7.5 million. It's 3%. Has risen since 2010 census. Its projected growth is 38%, which is very significant. And when you're looking at a place that you're trying to argue for high-speed rail, being a place that has that projected growth would help bring to the argument. GDP is only 3%, but that's also been rising. It's a region that is experiencing an increase in economic activities. When you're looking at feasibility, the growth is definitely growing. It's projected 38%. It's going to be over 10 million, they say, by 2025 or 2050. So it's going to be a place that's continuing to grow and can definitely benefit from a high-speed mass transportation. Its economic base is continuing to grow. It has currently 3% of the GDP, but that's only been increasing as we get closer to 2010. And when you look at it, there's actual rail infrastructure there. It already has the Amtrak Cascade line, which pretty much runs the corridor that's proposed. And it's only seen considerable increase in ridership, largely as gasoline prices keep going higher and higher. We're seeing more and more people using the Amtrak Cascade line there. Both Washington and Oregon states heavily funded. As he said earlier, they've been matching federal funds for most of the high-speed rail funds that the federal government has been giving them. So they really want it there. They're willing to fund it and make necessary improvements. And the other thing to this corridor is that it's international. So that would mean that management, the organization, security, funding, all these things have to be thought of somewhat on international scales because it crosses into Canada. And of course, security in this day and age is such a big deal. So you have to think of these things as you build it. But as a region, it's growing. The economic base is continuing to grow. It already has the infrastructure there in local rail that's seen about 500,000 person a day increase in the last 10 years. So that's only growing. So it's very conducive for high-speed rail as it continues to grow. So, brings to the Midwest corridor.
So the Midwest corridor is the largest corridor as far as how many state boundaries it crosses. And it encompasses 8 states essentially, and a number of major metropolitan city areas, including Chicago, St. Louis, Minneapolis, and Milwaukee, and Detroit being the largest of those. The growth pattern right now, projected growth for 2050 is about 17%, which isn't the largest of all the corridors, but it is pretty substantial. Currently, the area accounts for 17% of the U.S. GDP, which is a pretty large chunk. So this is definitely a viable corridor. As far as feasibility for high-speed rail in this corridor, as I said, 17% projected growth in 2025. It's a pretty large economic base. There's a large current rail infrastructure, Amtrak and freight. And a lot of the cities have not only regional rail connections, but local rail connections that go right into the city in proximity to airports and central business districts. As far as projected ridership in 2035 for the major cities, St. Louis, if high-speed rail of up to 110 miles an hour is put in place, ridership will increase to 1.1 million people. For Minneapolis, it would be just under 2 million people. Detroit, just under 2 million people as well. And if they put in a super high-speed rail that's about over 200 miles per hour, all of those figures will essentially double. So it definitely is a viable corridor, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you.